It is a little-known fact in the history of cinema that in 1942, the Parliament of Iceland used diplomatic channels to get the US government to apply political pressure on Hollywood, or to make them change the name of a movie and even cut out some scenes. And strangely enough, the movie Iceland became Katina, and the reason was perhaps the greatest insult the Icelandic nation has ever suffered. So what made Icelanders so mad? This is actually a fun topic to work with, since it includes movies, the influx of American influence into a nation of mostly fishermen and farmers, and it also includes a capital with 30,000 inhabitants, that's more like a village, or how we Icelanders were to be portrayed to the world for the first time in a movie. So it's necessary to take a look at the background first, before the war, since Iceland in 1939 was a poor country and very isolated. To travel abroad was a luxury that most of us didn't even dare to dream about. There was only one radio station in the whole country, no television, and the only window to the outer world for most people was the movies. So Icelanders loved the movies, or to be able to look up from the world of isolation and poverty and dream on. And we have to bear in mind that the Reykjavik downtown was no glamour at all, or nothing to dream about. And to call ourselves a nation of sophisticated cosmopolitans was an overstatement. But things were, however, about to change. Iceland was occupied by British troops from 1940, and in July 1941, the defense of Iceland was transferred to the United States. And shortly thereafter, the word got out that Hollywood was about to make a movie about us, Icelanders. And surely it had something to do with the military presence. However, this was very exciting for the peasants up in the north. Our tiny little country would be in movie theaters all over the world. This could be our big break. This could mean tourism, money, and overall big business. After all, the name of the movie was Iceland, and it starred the most famous Hollywood stars of that time, John Payne and the Norwegian ice skating queen, Sonja Henie. And soon after the movie was released in the USA, we were excited in Iceland to see it come in our own cinemas, but it never happened. Instead, the newspaper started to talk about the movie scandal, a scandal that shocked the nation. So what made us so mad? And in fact, it's even hard to begin since there are so many factual errors when it comes to Icelandic culture, or some of the national identities that we hoped to show to the world from this isolated rock in the middle of the Atlantic. And the opening scene was actually quite decent. Reykjavik is introduced as a cosmopolitan city with a strong entertainment scene, but from there it's all downhill. In fact, there was only one hotel in the city that was decent on an international scale, or Hotel Borg, which translates to City Hotel. But the opening scene in the movie takes place at Hotel York, a name that sounded a bit familiar, but not an Icelandic word though. But that's just a formality, so let's join the party. And there are no peasants in wool sweaters around here. This is all-American scene, and as soon as the singer starts, we were instantly reminded about the part of the military occupation that we actually wanted to forget. At least Icelandic men who found out the hard way that there was some competition in town.
You can't say no to a soldier, a sailor or a handsome marine.
And then we get to know the Icelandic lady Katina, and she looks nice. And she has actually this Icelandic boyfriend, perhaps not the strongest Icelandic male specimen to be found in my country. His face looks a bit like a codfish. And the name?
Your name, please?
Sverdrup Svensson.
Again, not Icelandic, so this couple doesn't even have Icelandic names, and there are people who felt it as a bit insulting. But the American soldier, of course, he doesn't look like a codfish, and he is not wasting any time at all. And this competition turns out to be too much for Sverdrup Svensson. There is no way he is going to compete against this handsome-looking American soldier. And it doesn't take Katina long to find out that there is smell of money from this guy. So she goes straight home to meet her mother and grandmother, who are in the national costume of, it's not Iceland. We think it might be Norway. And she tells her family that she is going to break off for engagement and marry the soldier that she met on the ball earlier that night. But according to Icelandic traditions in the movie, Icelandic girls don't waste any time when it comes to getting married, and the wedding is supposed to take place in a matter of days. So this was of course a bummer for the family. Even Sverdrup joined the bummer. First they tried to convince him to waste no time like the soldier and make a move, but then Katina tells them about the smell of money, and that made things way simpler for her family. So there we see the Icelandic morals. But how about our nature? And the first nature scene is about ice skating in July, or this indication from the director about the weather in Iceland. Not very promising for tourism, I have to say. And after some ice skating, the soldier comes running, and Katina takes this a step further and offers him in for some traditional Icelandic snack.
Papa, I think they would like some smorgasbord with their coffee.
Smorgasbord?
Smorgasbord.
That's what I thought you said.
Yes, I get it.
But in fact, she is just pushing the traditional Danish bread that has nothing to do with Icelandic traditions. So to add injury to insult, Iceland was a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and we were just about to declare full independence when this movie was made. So it was not a good time to make the Danish traditional dish into ours. And then we move into some traditional music and dances, and we get to see more Icelandic ladies in national costumes, and some of the costumes we see now look like they are from Switzerland, but feel free to comment if you know what this is. We only know that this is very far from being Icelandic, and it was a terrible insult back then to promote those costumes as Icelandic. After all, we have our own culture when it comes to this. And this party overall, I have to say that the only thing that we needed was to throw in some Austrian costumes and other strange traditions, just to make the circus perfect. So let's move to more outdoor scenes. About this time in the movie, many thought that trampling on our cultural heritage couldn't get any worse. But then we got a bit of Hawaii, while skating on ice in Iceland in July. And then we got some Latino style, and ending this with Asian. So goodbye Icelandic culture, and it's time to get married. And the marriage day, St. Olaf's Day. It is actually a public holiday in the Faroe Islands. So at least we got some cultural diversity.
Here, Sonny, keep it.
Thank you, ma'am. And here, son, give these back to the Eskimos.
Come on, walk over to the Jorg Hotel with me. I'm singing there with a swing.
And what is this with his German accent?
I must know where he was born, and his father's name, and his mother's name. It's important.
Very important.
And then we get some Danish into this.
Congratulations. Tillykke med mange barn. That means good luck and many children. And tomorrow morning, first thing, I will register the marriage license.
Wait a minute.
And finally, they get married. And the movie ends with some military-style ice skating. So, what a movie, and what follows is from the Icelandic newspaper database, where I could find many fun articles that captured the mood around this movie quite well. and the cultural shock that we went through as a nation. And I understand very well how we reacted back then, for the simple reason that we Icelanders as a nation have always longed for attention. And still today, we are proud of our country when it appears in movies and TV series. But this was the first movie dedicated to Iceland, and it portrayed Icelanders as greedy fools. And as for our cultural heritage, I don't have to say anything more. But as for Hollywood, they were just using the movie as a vehicle for the ice skating queen, and they most likely used Iceland due to the occupation. And one of the headlines says, movies like this can destroy friendship between nations. And then we got this open letter in the newspapers from American corporal stationed in Iceland, a long letter of apology to Icelanders. But that wasn't enough for us. This movie was already out there telling the story of those Eskimos ice skating in July and being released internationally. And that is when the Icelandic government stepped in, and the embassy in Washington got the task to prevent that this disaster of a movie would in future be in any way related to Iceland. And our demands were that all scenes where Iceland was mentioned would be removed. And shortly thereafter in the papers we got this good news. We were told that the name would be changed to Married on Ice, but it turned out to be Katina. But one question still remains today. Is the Katina version different? Did they cut out some of the scenes where Iceland was mentioned?
I fell for one of those posters. It says, join the Marines and see the tropics. Ha! Look where I'm at, up here with the Eskimos. And
I haven't found a copy of that version, however. But if you know about it, you can let me know, because this is a bit odd. But today, a rather fun chapter about the history of cinema. 50 or 60 years would pass before a TV station in Iceland dared to show this movie. And by that time, we could just laugh it off. And I have to end this with one good compliment that can be found at the very end of the article announcing the name change. Or Icelanders saying that this coffee shop in the movie, it looked way better than the coffee shops in Reykjavik. And we definitely should have one of those American versions here in Reykjavik. And with that ends the story of the Hollywood premiere of Iceland.